Hi, I'm Doug Cahill. I'm the Vice President of Analyst Services at the Enterprise Strategy Group division of TechTarget. I'm here with my colleague John Brown, Publisher and Vice President of Market Insights, to share with you some key findings from a recent research study that John led on the impact of environmental, social, and governance program on IT decision making, including vendor selection. Hey, John, for starters, I have to ask you as the first question right out of the gate here, why now? Like, what were the market conditions, sort of the dynamics in the market that made it the right time for TechTarget to conduct this research study?
Yeah, thanks, Doug. So the reason that now was the right time for ESG and looking at this in IT was we were seeing the change, right? We were seeing increased interest from the audience. We were seeing increased page views. We continue to see that. So we took the hint, and earlier this summer, we decided to floor our first survey so that we could understand what buyers were thinking about ESG, how it was impacting their IT purchases, and to take some of that squishiness out of ESG and to try to quantify it so that we could put out actionable information for IT vendors as they go into 2023 planning.
Excellent. Really putting sort of some shape and form on what we affectionately refer to at ESG as the other ESG. Hey, one of the things we looked at was whether or not respondents who participated in the study had their own ESG program, the relative maturity of their internal ESG program. What do we find in terms of a correlation there?
Yeah, unsurprisingly, we definitely saw some collinearity between internal ESG program adoption and how that was impacting what they were purchasing. So very, very clear there. One of the surprising things was how far along a lot of these organizations were and what those impacts had been. 45% of the respondents told us we have eliminated vendors because of ESG. And the figures went up to the mid and upper 90s when we said, do you expect ESG to impact your future buying?
So I'm an IT decision maker. I work in an organization that has a strong commitment to ESG. Therefore, I'm going to expect my IT suppliers similarly to have a strong commitment.
Yes, and you're actually going to look and you're going to eliminate some because their profile isn't strong enough.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. Hey, what about, the relative weighting in terms of the importance of the E, the S, and the G?
Doug, that was one of the more surprising things that we found was that there was no one size fits all ESG standards that are applied across the board. Environment, as you might expect, was pretty important across all of the sectors, but it was judged as much more important for evaluating vendors that provide physical devices, handheld devices, data center equipment. If it's got a plug in it, environment was going to be a big issue for them. While social wasn't the number one category for any vendor type that we looked at, those that had the most emphasis or were evaluated most on social were managed services, consulting, co-location providers. And then when we got to governance, if what you do is a service, governance matters. So cloud service providers, managed services, software as a service, governance actually was more important to the overall ESG evaluation of a vendor than environmental concerns.
Hey, what about other statistically significant differences based on vertical industry or geography? Did anything stand out there?
Yeah, absolutely. Western Europe is winning this in terms of IT audiences being advanced with this being a concern. When we asked Western Europeans to name vendors who they thought were doing a good job, they were able to name significantly more vendors than what we saw in Americas or even in Asia.
Hey, John, thinking about the findings in its totality, big surprises for you? Like what were the handful of things you're like, wow, that's really interesting. And gosh, I can't wait to run the survey again in a year and see if we're moving the needle.
Yeah, the biggest sort of, was how frequent vendors have been crossed off the list. That in fact, this screening for ESG was already something that's in place, and that more advanced parts of our audience are doing that now. So that was big. That organizations would pay more, 6% plus, for the same product or service from a vendor that had a better ESG compliance profile. those were big. So based on that, my takeaway advice for folks is make sure that ESG is a part of your go-to-market for 2023. I can't make this any clearer. You've got to say something, and you should be really trying to emphasize the aspects of ESG that are most important to your buyers for what it is that you're selling.
You probably need to have your program documented, right? You need some sort of policy statement. Is that fair?
Absolutely. We did see consensus that independent third-party research commissioned by you, but delivered from a credible third-party source was one of the best media vehicles that you could put into market to not get screened out for ESG. The least effective, honestly, was RFP responses. So that is not enough.
Hey, John, thanks so much. Obviously, we've just scratched the surface, sharing a couple of the key findings from, again, this research that was focused on the role of environmental, social, and governance programs on IT decision-making. Suffice to say that ESG is now a really important aspect of IT vendor selection process. Please reach out to learn more. Thanks for watching.